Welcome to Diverse, where we're getting real testimonials from people working to move the neurodiversity movement forward. We start this week with an old friend of mine, Marci Melzer, who started the website Waves of Communication. Disillusioned with ABA and the autism care industry, she now gives tailored advice to parents on how to make functional language fun. Today we'll hear her angle on natural language development, the flaws in the current system, and the money game. So with us today, we have got Marci Melzer, the creator of the YouTube channel and website Waves of Communication, which boasts a functional, that's functional with fun in all caps, learning approach to late talkers. So can you tell me a little more about what you do?
Yeah, so by profession, I am a speech language pathologist. So I worked in the system for almost 30 years before I realized that even as a practitioner in the system and also the clients that I was serving, it just wasn't working. I wasn't feeling like I could help parents and children unless the parents are sort of already ready to take on this job, basically. And work with their child who is not talking yet. And it doesn't matter what the diagnosis is. My philosophy is that parents have the ability to connect and facilitate the spoken language that their child needs to their best ability, whatever that is. And when they're equipped and empowered with the right tools and strategies to use during what you called functional activities, the results come a lot faster than the traditional therapy that I sort of literally grew up in the system using. And so that's why I created Waves of Communication. So the information is encouraging, enlightening, empowering to parents. I give them strategies they can use every day with their children at home that are easy to access. And as a result of them just trying it, then they choose to dig in and learn a lot more. But I have to really spend a lot of time encouraging them to try it in the first place because the system is very loud about wanting to take that job away from parents. And they're confused and bewildered and worried and afraid and all of those things. And so that's a lot of what I do is really empower parents and remind them that they are the best facilitator for their child.
Absolutely. That's I think just so fantastic. So this project, as I think I told you, is about autism in particular, but I understand that you have some overlap with autism, but it's not central. What you work with is what you describe as a late talker. So can you talk about that label a little more and kind of where it overlaps with autism, where it's different?
So the approach that I use is a neurodevelopmental approach. So we're working with the child's natural neuroplasticity to take them from the skills and abilities they have now into the skills and abilities they need to be functional in the world. And so the approach is functional because it takes a parent to intuitively understand what their child needs and wants to learn about, because both of those things are the reasons that we dig in and learn. Sometimes we have to learn things because we have to overcome challenges, and sometimes we learn things because we're curious and interested just about learning it. And so this approach works with a child with autism because as low as their functional communication may be, their internal intelligence is on fire. They're constantly learning and exploring and investigating things, but they also are reacting because their sensory systems maybe don't allow them to tolerate and accept and even navigate some of the input that they're receiving. So what I have to help parents with a child who is neurodivergent, who does struggle with stuff coming at them, processing it, understanding it, and dealing with it, right? How to work with the functional activities that same child, because they all need to do these things, right? But remember that neurodivergent child is going to be learning in a different way, and it's going to be super important for that parent who is the one who knows this child best, right? You know, I always talk about how these moms, these neurodivergent children have been communicating with their parents, whether it's verbal, nonverbal, through gestures and behaviors or eye rolls or whatever, the cries, screams. They're communicating already. And when a parent understands that quote unquote language, I'm using my air quotes here, to really dig in and then help shift whatever language that child is functionally using into something that's more functional to the real world, the world outside of the mom-child relationship. So does that explain a little bit more about how the process?
It does. It sounds like your approach is very individual child centric, that there's really no sort of key for every kid. You got to work with the kid.
Yeah, there are a few tips and strategies. In fact, I do a lot of videos about habits, right, that parents can get into. Maybe they learned from watching videos or a therapist or some experience like that, that they were able to prompt or make or coerce or manipulate their child into doing something. Maybe the therapist was able to do that and the mom's jealous, right? And they pick up those habits from the therapists and bring them home. And then the child is showing them through their nonverbal behavior how it's not working for me. I don't like this situation. It's not helping me feel good. In fact, it's making me more anxious and worried and afraid of the world because that therapist was already triggering, right, to this child. And now the mom's doing it at home.
Yeah, absolutely. You see a lot of that.
To try to change that mom's mind, I direct them back to the child, right? Because they can learn all they want on YouTube from therapists or even from me, but they won't know if that approach works until they try it and they see the reaction from their unique individual child, especially a neurodivergent one, right?
Absolutely. So if we can get, kind of real here for a second, you said kind of a lot of comments about the system, and I see on your website that you make a point to distinguish yourself from ABA. So kind of, I don't want to make this into an angry conversation, but I do wonder kind of where are these sort of flaws in common autism care that you are hoping to combat?
Well, unfortunately, it's a money game. It's not a helping children game. It's turned into a money game because even back in the day when I was a therapist, first starting to be a therapist, the cash cow back in the day, now I became a therapist in 1990. So in the 90s was the height of heart disease and old people were having strokes. And that was the sort of thing to sell. If you were a therapist, you could sell therapy to old people who were having strokes. And then, of course, they changed their diet and people started getting healthier and they're not having so many heart attacks. But the next big problem to solve in the system is these children who are not speaking well yet. And it's compounded not just with neurodivergence, but with technology, right? Which is taking children, whether you're neurodivergent or not, out of human experiences. And a child who's not comfortable in human experiences anyway, because they feel the anxiety from social and sensory issues and all of that. And then you give them a tool to help them isolate from the world into their own world of whatever they want to do. And then it worsens the problem because spoken language, this functional language that people need to get jobs and make friends and have relationships and, go to the customer service complaint, right? If you have any kind of issue you need to communicate to a stranger, you've got to have functional language and you've got to have some ability to self-regulate to get through that ability. And neurodivergent kids need training in those tools. They need support to help them develop it. They need support to put up their armor to get through things that are tough for them and process through it when they have to, right? Because that's what the case with the neurodivergent child. They can't just accept what's going on, just get over it, right? That's the whole point of this neurodivergent awareness and acceptance and all of that. It's not let's let them be who they are. Let's empower and facilitate them to be the best version of who they are, not just leave them alone to their own devices, which is what a lot of neurodivergent people want, because they're so pressurized by a system that's ABA, making them do things on command repetitively that may have no value, no intrinsic or personal value to them, just arbitrary abstract tasks, right? That child is going to see that experience as something that's disempowering and controlling. And then again, it's just like, what are they bringing home? The anxiety and frustration from those experiences, and then they're sharing them with their parents through behavior, and then parents complain back to those professionals saying it's not working, you're not fixing my child's behavior. And that's because, remember, the system is set up saying, give me your child, we'll fix this problem, we'll take care of this for you, we're the experts. And then parents just leave it, they don't do anything. Or remember, these ABA things only work if parents are also doing it at home, because the more hours a child is quote unquote programmed, the more effective it is. And if the child is resisting the activities and the parents aren't doing them at home, then those hours in the ABA center become less and less and less valuable to everybody. And that's, again, why I left the system, because even I, as a provider, was expected, like, you have to work this way because this is how we get paid. And I wasn't interested in that. If that's how I have to get paid, I was almost ready to quit speech therapy, because this exchange of you can't have the cookie until you say cookie kind of business just doesn't match with this functional approach that I know works better. And I know it because I've worked with thousands and thousands of families, Avi, thousands of them.
Absolutely.
And the ones that get it. And the ones that want to give it away, they wait. Their kids do not make improvement. Their kids end up in greater frustration and show more behavior, and they get older and older and older, and the gap widens and widens and widens. And now they're a teenager with no coping strategies, no functional language, and no ability to go make friends and do the things they want to do in their heart, right? The social and, human experiences they are really wanting to have. Isn't it true? Most neurodivergent children want to have friends. They want to get jobs. They want to be able to do it, but it's challenging for them. And they need someone to facilitate that experience to help them learn. Both the system learn to accommodate them, which I get needs to happen in some cases, but in most cases, they're just not gonna accommodate these kids. We need to equip and empower these kids to stand up for themselves and advocate for themselves and self-regulate. They can't, depend on the sensory break or the whatever. If they've got to do a job, they've got to figure out how to keep themselves focused through their job and all of those things. So, yeah, it's a long-term process. It's not something that is a quick fix, certainly.
It is. I've in some of my research, I've seen people in kind of the neurodiversity movement saying, people who were, are autistic, saying sort of the ABA was something that was traumatic for them. Would you agree that ABA can be traumatic? Have you seen instances of this?
Yeah, for sure. I have actually seen, parents have sent me recordings of really unfortunate situations that they put their kids in. And the parents don't know, because they take them back in a room and they lock the door, and they can't tell the parents to go out and have a coffee or wait outside while I work with your child. And they don't let the parents in the room because they don't want the parents to see how they are literally bribing and torturing these kids. And I say those words lightly, but emotional torture, being forced to sit in a chair, being forced to do things you don't want to do repeatedly for a child who is already uncomfortable in the situation, right, is torture. And the fact that they have to, as soon as it doesn't work, they say you have to add more hours, is like adding more, hours to the punishment in hopes that the punishment's going to solve a problem, and it's not. And the other thing that I really feel with this ABA system is that because it's become so standardized now, there are so many people in this system that there are not enough really skilled providers who know how to work with children. The one who's designing the program maybe went to a college program and they learned about child development and those things, but the actual people that are spending the time one-on-one with the child have been to maybe a weekend course, or they did an online thing where they took some test. They don't know anything about child development or neurodivergence or how to intuitively respond to someone. And remember, a lot of these are young women and men who have never had their own children, so they don't even know what it's like to be a parent and respond to a child, let alone these kids that have behaviors. The reason they're in ABA is because they're showing behaviors that somebody doesn't want to see. The mom, the teachers, they're extinguishing or replacing these behaviors instead of affirming that these behaviors have a reason and a mission and a meaning for that child, whether you like them or not. And if you want them to stop, then you just have to show the child a new and better way to communicate. And you have to show them how to communicate that message, not your message out of a book that you think they all need to learn. It has to be the message that the child wants to communicate if you want them to shift that behavior into functional.
Yes, that's a very good point. So for our audience who, may not be sort of so experienced in this field, ABA practitioners do not need a college degree. In fact, their training is often quite brief. It is not a terribly difficult field to become a practitioner in. Now, as I understand it, I've never worked in ABA. Fortunately, there is a superior to ABA who writes the programs, who will usually have more training than the ABA practitioners. But the people working one-on-one with the children, ironically, are usually the least trained people.
Yeah, the model is similar to nurses and CNAs. So like when you think about it, the one who actually is cleaning up the patients and maybe taking vital signs and those kinds of things that are actually working with the person is the CNA who went to their weekend course. But the nurse as even looking to the doctor or someone above them to write these prescriptions. So if there is some kind of reaction or to the medication or a new symptom that pops up or some kind of different situation, that CNA is not going to be capable of treating that medical illness. And the same is true with ABA. This RBT, registered behavior technician, has these letters behind their name because they got some certificate at a deal, but they don't know how to react and respond when a child has a meltdown in the middle of their structured matching activity, you know what I mean? Or gets up and leaves the room or stands up and starts screaming at them. They don't know how to handle these things except for sit down, do it again, do this, do this, do this, do this, say this, all of that stuff. Because again, how much can you learn in a weekend course?
Yeah, absolutely. So you've described the sort of system of ABA and current autism care as something of a money game, which is a criticism that this is not the first time I've heard that criticism. I do wonder kind of, if you had your way, what would this industry look like in kind of your utopia?
Every one of these ABA clinics would be replaced with a facility where parents and children can come together in maybe a play-based environment. They can have the gym, they can have all the same stuff that they're using, right? But now they're involving parents and they're having parents teach them functional things and get the play kitchen out and get a real kitchen and teach kids how to manage sharp knives and, all that stuff and get power tools and show kids how to use those things depending on their age, right? This is functional activities that kids need to do. Teach children how to ride a bicycle. Teach children how to use public transportation, depending on how old they are, because however they're getting to their places in life evolves as a child gets older, right? First, we need our moms to take us, then we get our bike, then we get our driver's license and, all of that stuff. And remember, with a facilitation approach, each child would be evaluated by a facilitator, someone who knows about child development and maybe, of course, understands neurodivergence, understands sensory processing, maybe works together with an occupational therapist, because occupational therapists are functional, to come up with a home program that as soon as the parent leaves that center where they practiced it while supervised with a coach, someone who can help them work with their kids, listen to someone else work with their kid and watch them do that, then their assignment is to go home and do the same kitchen or bike riding or tool fixing or whatever at home, and then come back next week. But the first part of every session should be that evaluator talking to the parent about the struggles and the new abilities that they are observing in their child, because this is important. Parents need guidance from professionals to stay in the game of facilitating their kids' development, because they're super distracted by what they're going to cook for dinner and where the money is going to come from and what their spouse is doing and their cousin who got sick from COVID, or, all these other things in their life that they have to manage, their other children, all of those things that they have to manage, that they have to structure this time. After you go to the ABA or the non-ABA center, the functional facilitation center, right? And you learn how to work with your kids, you make a plan at home. And then the next time you go back, you report, this is what happened. I tried this and this happened. I tried this and this happened. And then that professional can guide you and say, oh, this happened because you were pushing too hard, or this happened because you weren't pushing enough, or this happened because you let him walk all over you, or, whatever, because remember, all these things are happening. Yeah. As you take these activities home and try with them, things are happening. Your kids are being kids. They're showing you who they are, and they're watching you to see who you are as the parent. And this is how they learn to go out in the world. They learn, my mom is a powerhouse. My mom is a wuss. My mom is the caregiver. My mom is the one I can't get away with anything is my dad. My mom is the one I go. See, this is how kids need to learn, even in their own household, so they can go out in the world. And when they've got a boss that's trying to manipulate them, or a boyfriend or girlfriend who's trying to schmooze them into doing something they don't want to do, they don't fall for these things because they're so programmed into doing everything that grown-ups or other people tell them to do from these ABA things. They have their own mind about things. And you can go through these scenarios, depending on how old the child is, into all kinds of social situations to teach. So that's what needs to happen. We need to replace artificial ABA programming with functional facilitation activities that equip and empower these kids to be learners, where once they this is the thing, once they have an experience, a nice learning coaching experience where somebody's facilitating, try this. Okay. Oh, I like this. Let me try harder. Let me do it again. Let me practice. Now I'm good at this thing. And I see you as my hero because you turned me on to knitting or bike riding or guitar playing or whatever it is that I like. And I went down that rabbit hole and now I'm Jimi Hendrix, all because you gave me my first guitar instead of make me sit in a chair and play, touch my head business. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seems like a lot of the sort of core point here is that current autism care is often sort of parent excluding. And what we need is to be parent including and teaching the parents how to work with their children instead of taking them off their hands, as the lingo kind of goes.
Development starts at home. And reality is God gave, whether you believe in God or not, God gave these parents, these kids for a reason. Right. And if you're a mom or a dad out there, or even a professional who works with these kids, and you really want to commit to this functional approach, then it's all about the work you do with yourself. Who am I? Who am I to show up for this experience? Am I showing up as a facilitator, or am I showing up as somebody who is scared of this mom who's scared of her kid? Right. And now we're all in fear and we're all trying to make this kid do things or stop doing things, right? Because we're in fear. Or do we see the child's fear, acknowledge the child's fear, dig in to the trigger for the child's fear and facilitate that? So now we're empowering that child. So they're not in fear anymore. And they're in a learning mindset where literally it skyrockets the progress with these kids when their parents make the shift from either doing their own version of at-home ABA or the ABA that they're taking their kid to. And then they shift into these functional things. At first, they feel real weird about it. Well, I'm talking so much and he's not talking back. But then they give it a week or two, and the kids are reprogrammed almost into a, hey, what have you got to say? I'm interested in listening to you. Can you show me this? And not only are they responsive to the teaching that the parent or caregiver or therapist is bringing them, but they're also bringing things to that person because they trust them. Can you show me this? Can you teach me this? What's this all about? So now learning happens from the child is saying, teach me this thing. You don't even have to make them sit and learn. They're constantly coming to you for learning experiences.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right. So for our listeners at home, if anybody at home is thinking, you're a parent who's going through this and you know that ABA is unsatisfactory, but you don't know what to do and you've just been sitting on it, wavesofcommunication.com. She does do individual counseling because broadband advice is not going to fix everything. That said, I do wonder, Marci, if you had to give just a little bit of broadband advice to parents, just one sort of comment to finish us off with, what would you say to parents out there struggling with this?
It's two. I'm just going to use two. Number one is make a plan. And I have a workbook, so you can use my workbook to make a plan. It's available on Amazon all over the world. And number two is slow down. You talk more slowly, act more slowly, be more slowly. Parents are in anxiety and worry. I got to fix this thing fast. I got to make my kid change fast. Change doesn't happen fast. Just slow down and reconnect with your child. And when you use the strategies in my workbook and on my YouTube, I've got a free get started guide. As long as you get started and reconnect with your child, that's how it's going to do. Make a plan, because without a plan, failure to plan is a plan to fail. And talk slowly, because remember, you're not giving this away, you're taking it back, and you've got to make a plan. So just start slow. You don't know what you're doing. That's why you're watching this video, right? You don't know what to do yet. And so you need to prove to yourself how powerful you are.
That's wonderful. That's absolutely wonderful. So we've done quite a lot of talking here today. I think what you've said is absolutely brilliant. It's been such a joy to have you. But we're going to, I think, wrap it up. Is there anything else you'd like to either just share with our audience or plug, or any final message you want to bring to this experience?
Yeah. So remember, even though I have been in the profession for decades, I still believe and will always believe that parents and caregivers, the one who spends the time with the child all day, are the best facilitators of that child's primary development. And you can learn how to facilitate the speech and social skills and integration and all the things you're looking for when you are equipped and empowered yourself.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Marci. It's been a pleasure to have you.
It's my pleasure.
That concludes this week's episode of Diverse. Make sure to join us next week when we'll hear from an autistic media student who will tell us about autistic stereotypes in media and how to spot them. Until next time.